right, we're back on High on Utah. I'm Heather Groom. Thanks for joining today. So, we're going to continue doing more question and answers. I've got a few more questions I want to talk about. One that I love, and I get this actually pretty often, is around what impacts a home value in a neighborhood. So, we're going to talk about that as well as education in Utah, education options. A lot of people are moving here with kids, and they want to basically find what best options they have, and how does the real estate market work with the education system. As some of you know, I used to serve on the State Board of Education in Utah. I represented Northern Utah County, and actually three school districts I kind of touched on. And then also, I was involved with the early days of charter schools in Utah, as well as dual immersion programs, specifically the Chinese dual immersion program in Utah. And our daughter graduated, she did Mandarin Chinese for basically since first grade all the way up. And then now she's attending Duke University, their American campus over in Shanghai, China, which is really exciting. And she loves it. So, but that's really impacted the trajectory of her life, the immersion programs. So, I want to talk, we're going to get over to the education piece, but first I want to talk about that first question, which is what factors impact home values in a neighborhood? That is a great question, and it's going to take a few minutes to answer because it all depends on location. We always say in real estate, location, location, location. So that is number one, the most important thing. So, for example, if you're on a busy road, a lot of times you may take a 10 or 15% hit on that home. When you go to sell it, because people don't want to hear the noise traffic. Again, everything sells at a price. It's just at what price? So it depends on if you have easements in the property, if you have power lines are also one to consider because if you're right near power lines, usually you also will sell that property for less, quite a bit less. And let's say on a reverse, let's say if you have amazing singular private views of the mountains. I had a client sell a property that was in Suncrest, and it had the most amazing, gorgeous views. No real neighbors that you could even see when you were in the backyard. And so that house sold for more money just because of the views. It was, I had a feeling we may have like a little issue with appraisal because sometimes the appraisers will give you a slight bonus on that, but there's not really a way you can put a price tag exactly on that. So again, what other factors impact? Like I said, I would be careful of if you're, building next to a junkyard or a noisy industrial complex, you need to be careful. Power lines, you need to be very careful of, and busy roads and freeways. And so you want to also check your cities to find out what the plans are with roads, and if you're going to have a big road in your backyard, at some point. So those are a few of the factors. And I sound really negative, don't I, right now? So it's not that I'm trying to be negative. I'm just saying those impact the values when you're reselling. But let's talk about on the opposite side. There's always a need or want when I have clients that are moving here from out of state. They usually ask about Sandy, Draper, Cottonwood Heights, Midvale Holiday. A lot of times they want to be on the east side, right near the, kind of the bench or right near the mountains. A lot of people want to be near Little Cottonwood Canyon so that they can go skiing. So those kind of draws are always going to make sure your property is at a high value. In fact, most of those properties that are right near Little Cottonwood Canyon area, near the ski resorts, when even though the last few years we've seen prices dip, those have not dipped as much. They've dipped a little bit, but their values have been pretty consistent. And it's because a lot of people, they know what they want when they're moving there. They want to be right near the ski resort. I mean, that's very limited inventory. It's pretty built out over there. So that's also going to help your property value over time because there's not a lot of new construction. There's not a lot that, you have a very limited area. So I call that, kind of that scarcity, right? Factor. Also, supply and demand. So if you bought a townhome and you're in a 20-year project, your value may not increase real quickly just because that builder has the ability to cut pricing when they want. So you have to be a little bit careful. I do sell a lot of townhomes in new communities, but you just have to know that the equity is more incremental there. So you want to look at those surroundings. Again, also amenities, like are there amenities in the subdivision? More people are starting to move and want those amenities. They're moving to Utah from places that had HOA and a lot of amenities. And one of, I would say, people's desires is they'll say, "Hey, is there a neighborhood swimming pool, or is there a neighborhood clubhouse?" And if they're moving from Texas, a lot of times they had those things, or California. But we traditionally in Utah, we've been a little bit anti HOA. So a lot of people have for years kind of prided themselves on saying, I'm buying in a place with no HOA. Well, that's kind of a pro and a con at the same time, because if you don't have an HOA, you don't know what kind of junk your neighbor is going to have in front of their house all the time. Um, Obviously, there's city ordinances, so that's important. But a lot of these cities are really trying to take a step back. They don't want to micromanage a lot of kind of neighborhood issues. And so they are requiring a lot of the developments to organize an HOA because they want that neighborhood to decide what's important to them, whether it's purple pansies, that's my example I give to everybody, or like maple trees. A lot of HOAs around here will say you need to plant 2 maple trees in your front yard, or in the park strip or something. So different HOAs, they have different rules. Sometimes it drives everybody crazy, and there's times it drives me crazy. But at the same time, there are some benefits, because if your neighbor wants to paint their house pink or fuchsia or something, they probably can't, because they would have to go through a review process, and most likely the HOA would not do that. So that's a really good question about, again, what impacts neighborhoods. Again, it's location, 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 though, first. A lot of times people want to be near main arteries like I-15, the freeway, but they don't want to live on the freeway. So they want to be in a quiet pocket, but still have road accessibility. And again, certain landmarks. I would say also think about landmarks. So, are you living near a park? If you have a nice park, usually that your value tends to hold a little bit better if there's amenities. I have a client that they bought a house, and right across the street, there's a huge park with pickleball courts, really nice kind of, I'd say, just amenities, park amenities that are free. And somebody that's going to come and buy that house eventually is going to look at that and say, that's a great location, because they don't have to put in their own pickleball court. They literally would walk across the street, a very small street, even just a neighborhood side, basically like a 1 minute walk across the street, and then they would have pickleball courts, they'd have basketball, they have other things. So again, that's really important. Also, leading into what we're going to talk about with schools. Look at what the schools offer that are in that area. A lot of people will say, "What, Heather? What is the best school?" And that's going to lead to my next question. And when we talk about schooling, because they'll say, Heather, what are the best school districts in Utah? Or they'll ask, Heather, what are the best, specific schools? Or what are the best charter schools? What are the best online options? Anymore, we have so many different options. If you're looking at kindergarten through 12, or K-12, as we refer to it as. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well with the education piece. Because if your school district they used to have ratings, and I have mixed feelings on the rating system, because the rating system would only take into consideration certain programs. So, for example, we had an international baccalaureate school up at West High School in Salt Lake City, and part of the school did really poorly on exams. They had attendance issues. They ranked very poorly. But then they had one of the best international baccalaureate or IB programs in the entire state. So then they had a certain program within the school that was very highly ranked. And so it was hard to actually rate that school or that district. And so that's one reason they've kind of moved away from school grading as much, because it's hard to basically say what things are most important. So, are you looking for a good football team, for example? Do your kids play sports? Then let's look at those schools and let's see. There's Lone Peak, Skyridge, Corner Canyon. And those are known for their sports programs. But then, if you look at if you're interested in, let's say, band, American Fork has an amazing program for bands. Like they've actually played in the Macy's Day Parade in New York City on Thanksgiving Day. Very good music programs. So American Fork High School is known for more of their music programs. They still have great sports programs and other things, but that's also one of their niches. So some people want to be in district, or sorry, in school boundaries with those options and programs. Another thing might be the art, like I said, language programs. Sometimes they have concurrent enrollment programs. They have programs. My daughter went to Skyridge High School and earned her associate's degree through UVU. So she took classes her junior and senior year that not only counted towards high school graduation, but also were college classes. And we have an amazing program in Utah where I can't remember exactly the amount per credit hour. I want to say it was something like, I think it was like $15 a credit hour. So she was able to get an associate's degree for a few $100s, that would have normally cost so much more. And then that also helped her get into Duke University. So it's pretty rare to be able to go from public school and education here to go to a school like Duke or my daughter's friends at Dartmouth, some really good schools. And even though Utah does not rank high in what we spend on kids, our outcomes are actually pretty good. So we have good programs here that are pretty groundbreaking as well. So I remember when I served on the state school board, people from other states would say, "How do you spend so little on education in your state, but you're getting these great outcomes?" And your kids are still going to even an Ivy League school or other schools. And it's because we do have really amazing programs here in education. And we have amazing teachers, really. I'm always impressed with the administration, the teachers overall. Obviously, there's going to be a few, maybe not so much. But overall, we have a very organized system that works well. And so there's other options as well with charter schools, depending on what you're looking for. There's different programs within those charters. And if you don't understand what a charter school is, it is not a private school. In some states, they're more private. It's basically like each charter is its own district, its own what we call basically it's its own education system. So it's independently run, it's controlled locally, it's not part of a district. But it is still public education, which means that your tax dollars still are paying for it. And you can put your kids, you can call the school and put them in what we do is here in Utah is a lottery system. So they basically it's like I've actually watched them do this before. Sometimes it's on a spreadsheet, sometimes it's like bingo balls. I mean, it's everything. So a lot of times, then your kids are drawn to go to that charter. Charters typically have about the same number. It used to be they had significant fewer children at the school. Not as much now. I would say it's a slightly smaller class sizes, but a lot of times there's uniforms, even if it's just like the charter school that my kids went to when they were younger. we had a dress code, but it was more just like polo shirts from Walmart, that could be 5 different colors with 2 different colors of pants. I actually loved it as a mom, just because then, it wasn't hard to pick their clothes and it wasn't very expensive at the school year. It was just we knew what we needed to buy and get them ready for school, and that was great. So I'm a big fan of the uniforms, or at least kind of those modified uniforms. But we also have some charter schools that are online schools, and they offer classes and they're excellent. Like Mountain Heights Academy is one of them that I've worked with several times, and they have excellent programs. It's an online charter school, but it's great because for almost all of my kids, I think we had them at least take one class through that charter because it was online. It was easy. There's programs to do that. And what we liked is we were able to then kind of plan their day better, their school day better. So maybe they had, like my son, I think, got out like an hour early, or we did like a flex time where he could do homework during that time. And so then he did some online classes, and that worked out well too. And there's programs where those classes are also covered, or there's a very minimum cost. Or usually, though, they're pretty in line. So you can do a district school for the majority of your school day, but then also do some online classes. So, anyway, I can get really nerdy on this, as you can see, because I've been around the block 3 different times with all 3 of my kids. And so, how does this tie back in to real estate? Because there's options and there's a quality education system that's public. Some of the things that I hear back from my clients when they move here from California, for example, is they're so used to paying for private school that when they get here, they usually cut their costs like in half because they say, wow, we don't have to have our kids in private school anymore. Our insurance went down, our homeowners insurance. The other thing about Utah is we don't have a lot of natural disasters here. And so our insurance premiums are pretty low. And so you save quite a bit of money with that because we don't have hurricanes, tornadoes, all the things, hailstorms, like huge ones that are usually very damaging, flooding. We don't have areas like Houston where it floods often. And so because of that, our insurance premiums are lower. And in one case, I had someone who moved here, and their house payment where they moved from in Texas was almost the same price as their insurance and their taxes combined. So basically, their house payment was $1,500 a month, but then they had $1,500 a month in just taxes for their city, HOA payment, and then also insurance premium. And so basically it was almost like an entirely separate house payment, like 1,500. So they had 3,000 a month going out the door, which was crazy. So when they moved here, they couldn't believe how much cheaper everything was. So those are things to keep in mind. But going back to the education, let me look and see if there were any other questions on the education systems, because I do get a lot of questions about that, whether it's Provo School District, Orem School District, charter schools. People also usually want to know, this is another question I just saw, about universities. We have a lot of universities in Utah, and those do help the home values in the neighborhood because there's always a need for student housing. So typically, I have a lot of clients that when they, are sending maybe their first child to Utah to, maybe from even another state, and then sometimes also just locally, they might, be sending someone down to BYU or UVU. And, one of the things I talk to them about is it usually pays off for them to buy a small condo or buy a townhome or buy something, because otherwise they're going to be flushing rent. And then usually they have like 2 or 3 more kids that are coming after that. And so if you start adding that up, it really can add up quickly at how much money you're just wasting, and you don't have any write off with that. So a lot of my clients, what they do is they will buy a place and then they'll move their son or daughter in, or their child in. And then what they'll do is they'll have them manage roommates. And it's actually kind of a good experience for them because they have to collect rent from their friends. They have to meet bills, and it's a good experience. And so they end up usually making that house payment back. The parents that buy it usually break even, and then they're making an equity play because it's appreciating. Plus, there's write offs with that as well. I don't have any clients that have regretted buying something for their college student because they all have said, wow, I never thought about how expensive that is. So, universities impact the homes and the values in a positive way because there's always a market. Whether the economy's down or up, there's always students that are coming to that university. So, again, landmarks also matter, but universities, there's always a need. There's always professors that are moving there as well. It just kind of keeps that area alive. So very good question on that as well. And let me see if there's any others. How do charter schools impact property values in Utah County? Not as much. Just because they're schools, they're just like a neighborhood school. Definitely, it's great. It's a positive thing. They don't impact it in a negative way, but I would just say it's probably a wash. And then, let's say that you do not have kids. So I have some of those clients, and they'll say, okay, I don't have any kids. We have fur babies, right? Little dogs or cats or something. And they say, but how do schools impact them, or what are the best neighborhoods for young professionals in Utah County? And I would just say, like, just off the top of my head, when I see that question, what are the best neighborhoods for young professionals in Utah County? I think of Vineyard. A lot of, I call it, it's like you're graduating and then now what? It's kind of like that next phase. So there's a lot of people that are in graduate programs that live in Vineyard, or people that have finished, they're young professionals. They're just getting their first jobs. They just graduated. That's a great area. So I would say Vineyard's a great one. There's still some areas in Provo on the west side that are building new homes, and those are great. We've sold several of those lately. But I would say Vineyard's a great place for young professionals, as well as Lehigh. Lehigh, you've got Silicon Slopes. You've got a lot of tech area over there. And what people love about Lehigh is you can go north very easily, or you can go south. And so it's a great place to kind of pivot if you're not sure where you're going to be. If you're a young professional and maybe you just graduated and you're thinking, okay, what do I want to do? You can then decide, hey, I can take this job up in Salt Lake City or down in Provo. I had a client who's he worked down at Qualtrics down south, so in Provo, and so they lived in Lehigh because then they could get, he could go there, and his wife worked at the University of Utah up north, and so she could get up to her work as well. And so those are really important things to remember. But just know that young professionals, whether you have kids or not, the schools are impacting you usually in a positive way, because the neighborhood schools around here are, for the most part, ranked pretty high. So those are the questions for today on education and real estate market trends and what impacts your home value. Thanks so much for tuning in.